Very weird, you know, when you hear yourself being introduced. You think, who am I? The woman who needs no introductions. That's a lot to live up to, isn't it? And I'm looking around the room now and I'm just seeing, quite overwhelmed actually, because I'm seeing good old friends, some friends who've been dear old friends for many, many years. And lots of new faces too. I'm seeing our trainees, I'm seeing the yellow ribbons of people who passed their exam, and so many new faces. And I'm feeling now a bit overwhelmed, to be honest, by the number of lives that we touch on our journey and how many people we influence on the path. And I've been counting my years, and I realise now that I've got more years behind me than I have in front of me. And that's quite an amazing realisation, but also makes me full of gratitude for the journey that I've been on. And I know I'm up here, and I'm going to talk about the theme of the conference. But I know I'm up here because I've been here a long time. And I'm going to be telling you a little bit about our history. I'm going to share with you some of the principles that are important to me and that guide me in my work. I want to talk to you about the changes in TA theory over the years. And I'm calling it the story of three circles. So track with me, both with the themes and with the story of three circles, and hopefully be with me in this encounter. I don't know totally yet what I'm going to say, although I have prepared a PowerPoint, so I'm hoping that's going to give me the structure that we need. So what's the most important thing of all? When we consider our past, our present and our future, what is the most important thing? Well, I had to ask myself that question, given that I was going to give this speech. My throat's gone very dry. Scary up here. But the most important thing is presence. I tried to find a word that would actually sum up what the experience has been for me over the past more than 50 years in transactional analysis. I'm 77 now, so many years of life and many years of raising children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren now, and also so many trainees, so many people who I have taught. I worked out, that, I've been doing 101s, I do about 6 or 7 a year now, and I've worked out that I've done 101s for about more than 6,000 people. That is incredible. And when you think about, the people's lives that we touch, how significant and important that is for every single one of us here. Because if you're going to become a psychotherapist or an organisational consultant or an educator, certainly in transactional analysis, you're going to touch so many people's lives. And the greatest, what the word is really, consolation almost for me, is to know that people do transform. And we've been talking about that in terms of some of our people who just passed their CTAs. In fact, we were talking about watching you dance last night, Evan. was just so wonderful. Made me kind of think about, this is what we're here for, the transformation that we actually see. So I think presence is about being fully alive. It's about being fully in the here and now. And that's why I can't give you just a prepared talk. I want to be present with you right now. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge when you're standing up here and having to talk with. And this creates, I think, if we are present with people, whether it's our client, whether it's a trainee, whether it's our son, our daughter, or even someone at the bus stop, then we are giving them our attention, giving them the gift of our attention. And that, I think, is the most healing and powerful tool that we have. And I think this is what is the essence of encounter that we've heard many people talk about. Certainly Giles has written a lovely article about it. And I think it is in the encounter that we truly meet and truly change and truly transform. So I invite you into this encounter with me this morning. Let's see where we go, shall we? One of my secrets of life, as I often call it, is vitality. And I think I've already said that presence is about being vital and having vitality. And for me, being alive and in this world and still doing TA, it is about asking myself a question. And it's a question that I often ask myself. In fact, I ask myself in almost every situation I'm in, whether I'm, doing an exam, or whether I'm reading a book, or talking to somebody, even at the lunch table. What am I thinking when I'm talking to you at the lunch table? I'm thinking, is this enlivening, or is it deadening? If you see me get up and walk away, your answer. But it's like, this is what has governed my life, really, is about whatever I'm engaged in, whatever book I'm reading, whatever theory I'm talking about, is if it enlivens me, I'm going to go on bloody doing it. Because that is about being fully present, and if it doesn't, then hey-ho, I'm off. And some of you know this because I often say it, but I can remember when I first started in TA, many, many years ago now, 1971, 72. I was doing research at the university. My husband was a university professor, and I was doing research in English literature. I came across TA. I'll tell you more about that earlier. No, I'll tell you now. I was doing some very strange things. I was doing something which was called an encounter in a college in Derbyshire, where we invited people to do strange things, like, because this was the 70s, this was like the time of the human potential movement and Islam, and people doing these encounters, encounter groups and things like that. So we were doing these encounters where people would mix dance and music and drama and psychology, and we'd do weird things and see what happened. Well, people did strange things. They did weird things. I can remember there was one exercise where we got people to put paper bags over their heads with little holes in them. And half the group had paper bags and the other half didn't have paper bags. And we thought, well, let's see what happens, shall we? All the paper bags bags went to one end of the room, the non-paper bags went to the other end, and they started to fight each other. The non-bags tried to get the bags off of the bag. And I thought, why do people behave like this? Why are they so aggressive? Why do they suddenly split? And it's like, I have to find out about this. So I went to an adult education class run by a wonderful little old man called John Alloway on group dynamics and transactional analysis. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then I thought, hey, this is wonderful. And I started to read all the TA books I could get hold of. And I can remember my husband saying to me, Adrienne, he said, you should give up that TA, it will get you nowhere. Well, I thought to myself, do you know what? Reading these TA books is enlivening for me. And my research was deadening. So I thought, I'm going to give up the research and I'm going to do TA. Well, here I am. But I do keep saying to myself that as soon as it becomes deadening, I give up. I'm off somewhere else. And I'm still here. And I'm still here because I am still enlivened, even after so many years. My God, it's a long time. I'm still enlivened and excited and stimulated by the encounter with transaction analysis and the people who have developed it, practice it, want to talk about it, and are willing to let it be present and grow with vitality. And that is one of the gifts we have in TA, is the fact that it has remained alive. It has continued to grow. And that for me has been the essence really of its success, and I think its continued success. Another principle that guides me and will be significant is about connection. How we connect with each other. And it's about our willingness to be open to the other, our willingness to receive from the other. It's a willingness to be impacted. Will I allow you to impact on me? So about a willingness to respond. Will I let you know how you impact on me? And how will I do that? And if we engage in that encounter, and I think this is what encounter is about, then we not only have connection, we also have reciprocity. And I'm going to say more about reciprocity towards the end of my talk with you, I think that. How are we doing? This won't come as a surprise to some of you. This is my diagram, the one I always use in almost every workshop. And those people at the burn are all giggling now because they say, oh God, not that one. But this is one of my secret of life diagrams, which does explain everything for me, and I'm going to share it with you yet again. And this is what is our way of looking at connection and reciprocity, a deep connection that we can make with each other in our presence and in our encounter. Well, on one of those circles we have the self. You've got to be there, you've got to turn up, you've got to show up. Somebody said, who said that? You've just got to show up. They said it to me recently. So we've got to show up, but also we have to connect with the other. And the other may be another human being, the other may be transaction analysis, the other may be the candidate in an exam board, the other might be a book that you're reading, it might be a tree that you see outside. So it can be a person, it can be whatever. And we all know, of course, that originally it was not just the other, but the mother, the mother. So I'll be saying more about that in a moment too. And what we need, of course, is connection. And so I have to be willing at some point to reach out to you. I can't just sit at the lunch table with you and not, I can just eat and not, or I can somehow connect out with you. Am I willing to make that connection with you? And if I make that connection, if I reach out to you, or reach out to that tree, or reach out to that person, I'm thinking of a man I met in the lift, who actually I think was one of the asylum seekers who's staying in this hotel, who very, very moved by this really, because he was very deferential to me. He came from Afghanistan, I think. And I didn't think I deserved his deference. So that was his way of reaching out to me, I think. And I was friendly back to him. It's like in order for us to make connections, one of us has to reach out, turn up and give to the other. And the other has to be willing to receive, to be open to the impact. And then respond. Is there a willingness to respond and to give back? And also then to receive. And of course there are 4 places in that diagram where interruption to contact, interruption to our connection, the break in our presence could happen. Is it because I'm not giving out to you, or is it because you're not able to receive it at the moment, or is it that you can receive it but you can't somehow give back to me? Or maybe you are giving to me but it's not what I can digest. So it's a very simple model, but it has served me well. I can almost teach it in almost everything I teach. And it still stands for me. Because it is the tool. It is the tool for how to be present. It is a tool for how to ensure vitality. It is the tool of reciprocity. And for me it is significant in almost everything that I do. I'm going to be using some of these models really as my, as I go through some of the history of TA and its theory, so I will come back to it. I also want to share a couple of other of my values, and another one that is significant is something which I call probity. And that is, in our presence and in our encounter with each other, in the connection that we make with each other, we also have to have probity, I think. And this is about being authentic. It's about being our real authentic self. And committing with integrity to the other, with respect. And I don't think that connection, even encounter without probity is, it could be dangerous or even could be hard. And this will lead me into this. Because all that we're talking about is soul. About who we are. If I say, who are you? It's not about, when Sue read out all the awards or medals or whatever, I said, that doesn't feel like me. This is my doings. But if you really meet me, in my being, you're going to touch my soul. And it's that soul encounter that I think is most significant and important. It is about, too, how we can expand our consciousness so that we are not just in our own subjective reality, but actually expanding our consciousness into something that includes the rest of humanity. So, those are some of the values that guide me. And they will be significant, I think, in some of the stories that I'm going to tell you now about our history and our theory. And I've got some thoughts about that, I'm sure you do too. Do you know, I just need a moment. So how about you just talk to somebody next to you just for a moment about any of those values that you've heard me share. Just for a minute, just so that I can have a drink and just a moment. Just, do they resonate?
It stops now, can you hear it? I don't know what it was. She kept saying it was the lights. And I was like, what lights? She said the spinning lights. And I'm like, no, bloody lights on. And it was bothering me, and I noticed like pepper had her ear cancer thinking, and I'm thinking, something settled. Filled up now, but it didn't even very empty. I think nobody can How are you feeling? Started though, the conscience of up.
Okay, folks, I knew once I'd asked you to talk about parting in the store. Oh, gosh, I had my bell. Okay. You want to have to see the open. Everybody wants it. Okay, so I hope what you will see. I hope that what you'll see is, in terms of what I've said so far, is that what I've given you are some of the colours and some of the threads in the tapestry that I hope I'm going to be weaving with you over the next half hour or so. And I want to start with honouring our ancestors. Because I think that this is really important. Who were the founders of the ITA, the Institute of Transactional Analysis, as it was before we became UKATA? And there were 40 founders. I have a list of them here. on old type, you know, typewriters. And it was really very important for me to go through this list because I think there are 40 names on here, and I think only 3 or 4 people here are still alive. I'm one of them, so yes! I tend to keep alive for a long time. But it was very moving for me to kind of look at this list and see some of the names on it that some of you may know, people like Beryl Heather, some people might know Beryl, and Gordon Law, Joe Richards, Archie Mills, Michael Reddy, John Halloway, Jenny Robinson, Mavis Klein, Mary Cox, Juliet Pulitzer. Anyone remember Juliet? See, so I say it clear, I remember, and of course, nobody puts their hand down. Marcia did. And it's like, oh, Marcia. Yes, you are. You see, it's like, how long does our presence survive? Only in the memory. Only in the memory of people who, while we've still remembered that, we still have presence, right? So I want to remember with you some of the people who brought us here. Because they're in our parent ego stage, our organisational parent, if you want. So I'm honouring really 3 people. The first is Professor John Alloway, that man who first introduced me to transaction analysis. He was he was little. Professor of adult education in Leicester University, and he taught adult education classes in Northampton and in Leicester and in Nottingham. And he was reading TA as it was being published, really. And it was in those early 70s, really, that he was teaching. And when I went to one of his classes, I thought, this is fantastic, I will carry on. And I asked John if I could work with him. Now, the way John taught transaction analysis was very much in the convention of group dynamics, of Bion's work in group dynamics. So some of you might know some of that, but what you would do is like sit people in a group and analyse the transactions from a kind of more separate perspective, not with the engagement or presence that we're now doing in our work. But the theory was absolutely fascinating, and I owe so much to John. He was a man who had a suitcase, one of these little briefcases, and he would take out, every time we had a class, he would reach into his suitcase and take out these templates for circles. And he would never draw a circle on the board unless he had it perfect. He would always tell me off, because then I eventually taught with him and carried on teaching education classes initially. And his comment was always on the shape of my circle. And you know, if I left a little gap between the circles, he would say that is pathology, and if I overlapped them, he said that's pathology. I must get them absolutely correct. So John, whose perfection and probity really was very important, and he was one of the prime founders. He did find a man called Alan Byron, who was a psychiatrist in Sheffield, who was also reading and interested in TA, and connected with him. There was also a very remarkable woman in London called Margaret Turpin. She, in fact, was my sponsor for my CTA, and a GP in London, and in fact those very first meetings of the ITA took place in her sitting room in Palmer's Green in London. She was a woman, you know, who Ian remembers her, who always said, "What's the contract?" And it didn't matter what work we did or what work we presented, she'd kind of say, "Where's the contract? That's not a contract, you call that a contract?" So it was all about contracting with her and making sure that really was sound. But the prime entrepreneur of TA, and we really do need to honour him, was Michael Reddy. Michael Reddy was a Jesuit priest who had studied with the Baldings, came over to the UK, and was a man, an adventurous man, a clear thinker, a man who worked in organisations, and he was the first president or chair of the ITA, and also helped to found the European TA Association. So we're going back in age really here to 1974, when the ITA was founded. I could say a lot about these people. There you go. And that's me and Ian. Not a very good photo, but can you see? I started young, didn't I? Actually, to be honest, I trained Ian Stewart, and he graduated. I ran a training in 1975 in Nottingham called the Nottingham Centre for Transaction Analysis. And Ian was one of my trainees there, and he graduated and became like a member of staff. And then he said he was going to go off and do this UKATA qualification. I said, "You don't need to do that, CTA stuff." I said, "You know, you've already qualified with me." He said, "No," he says, I think I'll do it." He said, "Oh dear." So I thought, I can't have him more well qualified than me. I better do it as well. So off we went to Villar and we did the exam together, and that was taken in Villar in 1984, I think it was. And in those days, you could do the TEW at the same time. So we got our CTA on one day, we did a workshop together for the Villar conference the next day, and the third day we were on our TEW. And it was on the way home, actually, on the train, that we decided that I would close down Nectar, Nottingham Centre for TA, and instead we would start a training together. So you can see he looks like Medallion Man, doesn't he? I mean, and that was me. And that was us when we got our TSTAs and with our sponsor, Emily Rupert. And you know, some of you know that I was on a journey with Ian for many, many years. We worked together for about 35 years, eventually making the Byrne Institute happen between us. It was a really good partnership. And it was a partnership because it was based on respect and connection and probity. And we never forgot John Alloway's circles, because for us excellence became one of the values that we wanted to perpetuate. I also want to honour some other people from the beginning. So this is our little quiz, folks. Here are some people. Do you know who they are? So, you know, just buzz just for a minute, okay, real people, and see if you can recognise any of these people. These are some of your ancestors. These are some of the people who in the 80s.
Larry's Jelly Brothers, 7th Law. I think it's produced by Sue Fish, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there were the other reprobates. whether she's doing it. No, it's not in England. It's probably in England. I don't know. Eight. I don't know.
Okay, let's see if you're right. There were many others, by the way. I couldn't get their photographs. Some of them only got the very last minute. So who do you think number one is? Just call it out if you know. Anyone know who number one is up there?
Dimitri?
Hang on. Yeah, this person.
Dimitri?
No, they're all UK, by the way. I'm putting the emphasis on the UK rather than international. But did international, we'd be here till next week. So it's Mavis Klein.
Oh.
Mavis Klein, who was like a really weird woman. A dear friend of mine, vibrant woman who really fine mind, very creative. But I don't know, her books didn't go down very well because they were all a bit eccentric. But she had a marvellous cheesecake recipe. She actually played one of her books. Would you believe? Bless her. What about number two? I bet you wouldn't recognise him necessarily because he disappeared. He was there right at the very beginning. His name is David Porter. He now calls himself Tony Porter. In fact, he wrote to me, believe it or not, just a week or so ago, from after 50 years.
Oh.
So after, so David Porter ran a little study group on transactional analysis, and he was the one who got in touch with Mike Reddy. He was the one who started to first of all gather the people who were interested in TA. So this is, so that's David Porter. What about this woman here? Patricia Clarkson.
Susie.
And you know, I put them in because they were very, very important, came from South Africa and were very enthusiastic, started training people in their bedroom, really, in their house, you know. I had to move, because Sue always used to tell me how they moved all the furniture out into the hallway so that they could get people in to train them, and then eventually built Metanoia, as you know. Petrushka, the finest mind, again a very strange person, but somebody who certainly had presence, and I think anybody who had been taught by her, has anybody here been taught by Petrushka? Yeah. She had presence, didn't she? And Sue had that wonderful creativity. And what a good heart and good soul that Sue had. And brought so much love and joy into transactional analysis. She was the one who was really responsible for the whole theory of rechilding. Okay, who do you think? Number five. Oh God, I keep going down here. I hate this. Number five, who's this one?
Mary Cox.
Mary Cox. Mary Cox, she was one of the founders of TA. Very fine mind again. She was, in fact, for the ITA, she was the first secretary because she was so well organised. And, you know, she was the one who typed up all the notes and all the meetings. And, you know, they're the most powerful person in an organisation. And certainly ran a training in Cumbria for many, many years, and many very important and significant transactional analysts like John Heath and Liz Heath and Alistair. You trained with Mary too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Anyone else here trained with Mary Cox? Did you?
I am trained.
Really?
I think it was one of the last trainees.
Really? Wow. She was just amazing, wasn't she, in terms of her enthusiasm and her bright mind. And she developed, I think, the fried egg model of TA, didn't she? It's called. What about this guy, number 6? I bet nobody knows him. At least you would recognise him from that picture if you did know him. His name is Lawrence Collinson. Anyone heard of Lawrence Collinson? He was one of the first people in London really to run TA groups. I remember actually running his group for him, with him, at some point in London. By the way, this is how I passed the first TA exam. Because I'd already been teaching transactional analysis, they had to kind of validate me, they had to find a qualification for me, you know, grandparent me in. So I had to take a special exam. In fact, Mary Cox and I are the only people in the world who have this TA qualification. And it's the professional membership, it's called, of the ITA. Yeah, I've got my own certificate. And part of the exam was that they said, well, can we hear tapes of your work? I said, tapes? I don't tape my work. Oh, they said, well, how do we know if you're a good transactional analyst or not? I said, you'll have to come and see me. So I invited them to my groups, and in fact I went to Lawrence Collinson's group to run his group so he could see if I was a good enough transactional analyst. And he was a bright man. He was one of the prominent gay writers, by the way, in those 70s, and very distinguished in the gay movement. What about the next guy?
Gordon
Law, bless his heart. And, you know, a man who really brought the spiritual element, I think, into transactional analysis with his amazing book and his work. What about number 8?
Alice Stevenson.
Anyone here remember Alice? Oh, please, all people put your hand up. We can't leave Alice out here, can we? She was just, for those of you who knew Alice Stevenson, she was the funniest, brightest, wonderful person. Trained down in Kent, and people like Suzanne Boyd, Melanie Lewin, some of you know who worked with her, and many people here who were trained by her. She was one of my dearest friends, and I can't come to a conference without mourning the loss of her. Because we always used to sit next to each other and make fun of people. She was incredibly naughty. She was one of those people who, you know, if you sat next to her at school, she would get you into such trouble. She would whisper something and make you laugh, and the teacher would tell you off, and she would look innocent. And there were other people there too who were very important. I couldn't get pictures of people like Brenda Mary Tweed, Archie Mills. Couldn't find a picture of Archie. But lots of people who were there. These are some of the people who were there in the 70s. And then, of course, we move on to people of the next generation, really, people of the 80s. Do you recognise any of these?
Yeah.
Well, you should recognise some of them at least. What about number 9? Do you recognise this one? Julie Hewson. Yeah, Julie Hewson, who started off the iron mill. And number 10, Trudy Newton, who was here for the exams and is still going strong, one of the pioneers of educational TA. I mean, the people who know her quiet, dignified wisdom. What about this person?
Julie Hay.
Julie Hay, vibrant Julie Hay. You know, so incredibly entrepreneurial and hard-working, who's done such an enormous amount for organisational TA. What about number 12? Joanna Beasley Richards, who started the Wealden Training Institute. What about number 13?
Charlotte.
Charlotte Sills. Again, she worked in metanoia and really managed. She was the person who kind of lifted metanoia back into respect, actually, because there had been a major crisis with metanoia, and Charlotte took it over. Together with this woman, actually, do you remember her? Maria Gilbert. Maria Gilbert, yes, who also came from South Africa, and both of them worked, of course, in the metanoia and did so much really to contribute to TA theory and respectability. What about number 15? I think Keith Tudor, now in New Zealand, but he was one of the great provocateurs, wasn't he? The person who would always kind of question. Wonderful man. And, you know, the originator of co-creative TA with Graham Summers. What about 16? Helena Hargadon. Yes, who together with Charlotte was responsible really for giving birth to relational TA. Who else have we got here? 17? Yes. Number 17, Carol Shadbolt. Again, she was there very early on. And still around, bless her. Number 18. Alistair, you trained, I think, with Archie Mills, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
When did you start with Archie?
Oh, in the early 1980s.
In the early 1980s. Archie was this great Scottish guy, organisational TA, wasn't he? But very grounded.
Yeah.
So, you've been around a while.
Pretty well, yeah.
And, you know, he was a kind of champion of burn transaction analysis. And I've also put number 19 up here. Mo Felton. She trained with us at the Burn Institute, but was one of our first people, and she's certainly around. She said she was around then, so. And who else have I got? Martin Wells, number 20. Martin's here. Is Martin here? Here, no, but he's here at the conference. A wonderful man, really, who again has brought spiritual TA into the forum. And there are many other people who are not up there who again are important and significant. People like Enid Welford. I don't know when you started, Enid.
Not until the 1990s.
Not until the 90s. Oh, that's why she didn't get on. Couldn't go that far. But there are other people, I don't know, like people like Suzanne Boyd and Victoria Baskerville. Is Victoria here? I don't know when she started. Jeff Hoppin, when did you start, Jeff? 1990, yes. So you did pretty constantly, but there were lots of very important people who are still around, but I thought I could go on forever doing this, so I better not. But can you see what I'm doing now? What I'm doing really is wanting to honour the people before me, because they are part of our history. And our history isn't just something cold, it is something live in us, as we were taught. So I thought I'd mention too, the very first TA training group that I think was in this country, the very first training group in this country that I ran, and that is me on the end there. Weren't always that thrilled. There was something, I think only one or two became CTAs. Some might know Sue Phillips at the back there became a CTA. That's Sue Phillips. Howard became kind of one of the leaders of the probation services. Ken Brown carried on doing lots of TA. Oh, you might know Robert Orr. So, important group, and they weren't always that prim. So I'd have to keep them under control. Okay. So that was just some acknowledgement of respect for our past. And what I want to do now is to talk about TA theory and how the theory has changed in our story of three circles. Because my golly, TA has come a long way. And there we have our PAC, P2A2C2, with the rim around it that Byrne put, and the skin around it. You know, this emblem, these three circles, is iconic. It represents what transactional analysis is. And we always say that as long as you can draw circles, you're doing transactional analysis. And, you know, again, I'm going back to John's templates there. As long as we get our circles in, we're doing TA. So maybe we need to kind of look at TA in terms of its circles. But of course, you see, we have many developments in TA. And what happens now in terms of our present is that we are very aware of the significance of co-creative TA and the integrating adult, and how important it is to, in terms of how we think about the parent and the child ego states as maybe being archaic or fixated, perhaps not even necessary anymore if we can integrate into the adult. So our aim really is to not have those other circles and stick with our one in the middle. Well, maybe. It's been a wonderful theory, co-creative TA, and the whole idea of the adult ego state has changed. But then you have, of course, people who also play around with these circles. By the way, do you remember Giles did a keynote speech in San Francisco where he put the circles the other way up? You know, so he put the parent at the bottom instead of the top. He said the child should be at the top, the parent needs to support the child, and the adult, the parent, needs to support the child. So he turned the circles, but at least he's still got circles, right? And then along comes my dear friend Martin Wells, who kind of says, well, if the adult ego state is about awareness, it shouldn't be in a circle at all. So he took the adult circle away, which is, you know, a wonderful concept really for what it might be to be in presence or to be fully alive and alert, is that we're not in a circle anymore, that we can dissolve, if you like, the boundary of the. So, you know, the circles we can use to sort of tell some of our story and some of our history. And we have, and I think this is so important and exciting, we have so many theories and approaches in transactional analysis, which I can't go through, I just don't have the time. But, you know, I've drawn this wheel really of some of the approaches in transactional analysis that you would get in that little booklet thing. But I think we're going to put some on the desk, aren't we, for people? And this is about just me picking out certain schools in transactional analysis, cathexis, redecision, constructivist, spiritual, whatever, and looking at their sources and the different ways in which we work as a transactional analyst. And if you look at this room now, I don't know how many people are in this room, but you're all different. And you're all going to be the transactional analyst that you are. And hopefully integrating with your own probity and with your own aliveness the theory and the way of working that best suits you. And we had to add up to that. I had co-creative TA and constructivist TA there. And of course now we have eco TA. Very important, and I'm going to say a bit about that. So, you know, we can talk about TA in the past, we talk about what's happening now in TA. What about the future? Where are we going? What might we and what might TA become? How might TA need to evolve into what is our next phase? So I've got some ideas about that. And again, I want to tell it in terms of the three circles. And the first thing I want to talk about is something which is growing now in our community and is being written, published as we speak. And this is Emma Haynes' work on TA maternal. And what she is writing about here, and her book, by the way, is going to be published, I think, in the summer. She's written one book already, but the transaction analysis version of TA maternal is coming out in the summer. And what she's talking about really is the beginnings of presence. The significance of the mother-child dynamic and relationship. Right from the beginnings of self in C0 to, and this is, I think, one of the great gifts of relational TA, by the way, is that Helena and Charlotte, when they developed relational TA, created a new ego state. They created an ego state for the mother-child relationship. This one here, the A0, is the mother-child relationship. So you have the emergent child, and this is the mother environment, and the mother-child relationship. And so Emma's work is looking at the protocol, but she is going back to the transgenerational protocol, which she developed, with Ronan, who I don't know if he's still here, he was there earlier. But what she is exploring in her work, and I do hope that you will read it, is how crucial those first days of the first 1,000 days of an infant's life, and how significant that connection with the mother is for that child's sense of presence, of self, and connectivity to themselves. I went to Enid's workshop yesterday, just the latter part of it, and I was so delighted to kind of hear you, Enid, talking about Sarah Payne's work in epigenetics, where, again, our mothers are in every cell of our prefrontal cortex. Is that right? Did I say that right? So it's like she was looking at the broken mother field that we carry with us in terms of a transgenerational trauma or wound, if you like, of the past that may be carried with us. My golly, this is one future movement of transactional analysis that I'm predicting will become more and more important as we go inwards to the core of self and being and the beginning of presence. And we've already started to account that in relational TA, but we need to go another step further, and we might be calling it TA maternal. And because what is significant there is going right back to earliest protocol. So I think we need to look more for that beginnings, if you like, of life and how significant that is. But we're also now so alive and alert to EcoTA. EcoTA that has been focusing on the presence, our presence, not just with self or with another, but our presence with nature, our presence with the environment. Giles Barrow and Hayley Marshall have done so much beautiful work with other people, many of whom are in this room now. I'm thinking about Beth, you've done quite a lot, Andy, and other people here who have been taking the EcoTA further. But we have a lot further to go. I think EcoTA has just begun to open that door. And although they have written the most beautiful work, there is so much more to do, because I think we have the impact of the environment to deal with. And the more injured our planet becomes, the more we are dealing with the repercussions of the damage to our planet, the more we will have to expand our understanding of EcoTA and its psychological significance, social and political significance. So I think EcoTA is opening the door to another era in transaction analysis. But it has to be an era that's going to deal with some of the pain and the suffering that will ensue because of the disasters that are happening in our world, and not just the environmental disasters, but the political disasters. So I think we're going to see another dimension of EcoTA develop. And it's going to require an expansion, I think, of TA group work. You know, TA started as a group psychotherapy. There was no thought that you would do it with an individual. In fact, I was around at the very beginning of TA when we used to require people to bring a tape to their exam of individual work. Because the assumption was you'd always do group work, so we wanted to see if they could work with an individual. And of course now it's the other way around, we ask you to bring a group tape. But it's like, I think group work is going to continue, because with the threat to EcoTA, with the threat to our planet and the expansion of TA, we are going to have to put so much more emphasis on community and on our how we relate in a community. I know, Jeff, you've been doing some beautiful, absolutely stunning and beautiful work on this. And I know other people have too. So these are the ways in which we are expanding and needing, I think, to do so much more. And this will mean that we need to learn something. We're going to need to learn how to manage equanimity. And this is about acceptance. This is about balance. This is about being able to hold good, bad, pain, joy, live and vital without polarising. I'm coming to the end because I can see some of the energies going. So. A couple more things I just want to explore with you. And this all leads really, I think, into a spiritual dimension of transactional analysis. And I think that this will be a fundamental and prime movement in TA in the future. I sincerely hope it does, because we have to, I think, expand our consciousness beyond the subjective into a much wider consciousness. Muriel James started this off with her most wonderful article on the core of the human spirit. But there are people like Ken Miller, who devoted his life to meditation, to spiritual practice. And people like Gordon Law and Martin Wells and Robin Hobbs and Jeff Hopping and Jane too, and John Heath, who are writing about the spiritual, who are including this now in our frame of reference, and so that we can be fully vital in the presence and fully alive. So the only problem is we need more circles for it. And, I draw on this diagram. It's like, where we've got to make it transactional analysis, right? So we've got to put it in circles. So, here we have the wonderful third order structure of ego states, but it's all about ego. Hey, we know how to understand ego. All these parent ego states, child ego states, or whatever. So as well as the kind of the Emma Haynes going into the depth of self, we've also got to go beyond that, I think. So I'm putting, in my diagram here, all of the ego states into a circle at the bottom, where the child normally is, okay? So I'm going to call those ego states, as they are called. But then I think we have another ego state that we do need to develop. That is an eco state, an awareness of who we are in the environment and in the planet, so that we are seeing ourselves not just in relation to our past, but to our, the land that we inhabit. And Charles Barrow wrote an article called, God, you have to remind me of it, was it called Soil
and
Society? Where he already is linking the significance and the importance of soul, not just to the soil or to the environment. And so I'm going to put another ego state up there, which I'm going to call our soul states. We've got ego states, eco states, and soul states. And I think what we have to do is to expand our sense of identity and presence into other areas of our self and other. So we need to move away from an egocentric self to an ecological self, and expand that into a spiritual dynamic. Now, you see, because I can draw circles, it's triad, isn't it? And, if we put physis in there, then we know now where that arrow goes. Now we know where the arrow goes, right? It starts right at the beginning with C0, and it goes way out beyond the ego states, that's for sure. And now we know where it goes. Maybe it's better to draw the diagram this way, where we can see the rings going right for the I am centre of self and the first connection with self to the expansion of self. But that's not going to be enough, I'm afraid. I think there's another movement afoot, and Andy, you indicated this in your speech too. And this is AI, artificial intelligence. And I'm calling this intelligent AI. Some irony in calling it intelligent. So what do we mean? What impact do you think artificial intelligence is going to have on transactional analysis and the development of what we do as practitioners and our theory, eh? That is the question. And I've been asking myself this question. There are algorithms that can analyze vast amounts of data to identify patterns, predict outcomes, devise treatment plans for each individual client. We can monitor the client's process and progress. We can provide real-time feedback. We can even optimize our therapeutic interventions. By harnessing AI capabilities, therapists can offer more effective and efficient treatment strategies tailored to each client's unique needs. AI wrote that, by the way. I asked AI what it thought about how it could assist us as transaction analysts, what it could offer us. And this is what it took to say. So it's like, okay, so one aspect is, yes, AI might well facilitate us in our treatment planning and in our organisational structures, but I think it's going to be, we can go even further. And I was thinking about virtual reality. And what I'm thinking about here is creating via intelligent TA reparative experience. It is possible, I think, through artificial intelligence to give people new experiences of childhood, of parenting, to reframe past traumas, ways of devoting and developing new coping strategies. We could possibly create reparative experiences for our clients using virtual reality. So if they didn't have a caring mother, we could construct one for them. And then they could experience it, maybe have a new child experience there. They could have new experiences right there and then, maybe in our therapy room, of getting the parent. This is mind-blowing, isn't it? Doesn't it make you think about what happens to us? We could feed in interventions that are appropriate. We can not just, this takes reparenting into another dimension, takes rechilding into another dimension. And by the way, AI wrote that too. So will it be TA, and how will TA have to expand to include this? Well, again, I've drawn the circles. So we've got our parent, adult, child. But it may be that with new reparative experiences through virtual reality, that there'll be another parent, an intelligent parent, as well as our old existing parent. New adult, new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing reality, new child experiences. How are we going to distinguish those from what is present and real, from what is artificially generated? And my fear, and I'm going to put it up here, is that this will happen as we rely more and more on intelligence, artificial intelligence. What will happen to our adult and to our sense of presence and being? And I think this is why, you see that picture now, why it's significant. That we need to ensure that we bring presence and keep presence in our encounter with our clients, with our organisations, and with our planet. And so I want to finish now with vitality, connection, probity, and soul. What I think is important, which is reciprocity. And during the exams, I was reading this book, not during the actual exam, while I was being a process facilitator. A wonderful book by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I know, Bex, you've read it. Amazing book about this indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants. And in it, the writer talks about the indigenous communities who put out blankets on the floor of gifts that they have made to give to people. And you come along and you take what you want. And that open generosity. And she ends the book with this, and I'm going to read it to you because I found it so moving. She says, the moral covenant of reciprocity. Let you read it as well. The moral covenant of reciprocity calls us to honour our responsibilities for all we've been given, for all we have taken. It is our turn now, long overdue. Let us hold a giveaway for Mother Earth, spread our blankets out for her, and pile them high with gifts of our own making. Imagine the books, the paintings, the poems, the clever machines, the compassionate acts, the transcendent ideas, the perfect tools, the fierce defence of all that's been given. Gifts of mind, hands, heart, voice, and visions, all offered up on behalf of the earth. Whatever our gift, we are called to give it and dance for the renewal of the world. In return for the privilege of breath. In return for the privilege of breath. And that, to me, is about what reciprocity is about, and what I hope that TA and our future will be about. So, keep the presence, keep the soul. Thank you.